All right, well, welcome everybody to another sales chat. My name is John Golden. I'm back here in San Diego this week after a brief sojourn on the West Coast. And today we're joined by Lisa Magnuson, who is in Portland, Oregon. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we have, as usual, we have Martha, who is running the show from Vienna, Austria. How are you today, Martha?
Hi, thanks, I'm fine.
Good. So summer's starting in Austria?
What?
Summer is starting?
Yeah, summer is here.
Excellent. Because normally over the last couple of months when we go to Martha, she's all wrapped up in the trying to stay warm, but now it's getting all summery. Okay, so again, my name is John Golden. I am Chief Strategy Officer with Pipeliner Sales. I'm also the executive editor of SalesPOP online sales magazine. That's salespop.pipelinersales.com. And this is Sales Chat. This is a 30-minute rapid fire conversation focused on one subject, which today is executive engagement. If you want to get involved in the conversation, hashtag sales chats, and Martha will be monitoring that and answering that. Okay, so back to our guest today, Lisa Magnuson, who is an expert in corporate sales and top-line account revenue building, a consultant and an author of a great new book, which I encourage you to check out. So she builds successful strategic sales programs that drive revenue. And before we finish today, Lisa will give you all our contact details so you can follow up more and you can learn more about her book as well. So again, welcome, Lisa. And today we're going to talk about executive engagement. And let's start off by let's start off with just a baseline. Why is executive engagement different from other types of engagement for a salesperson?
That's a great question, John. And I think the answer to that question is that if you're going to be involved with any truly large deal, you need to have an executive sponsor. And I have, it's almost 100, gotten to the point where it's 100% of the time. I think we're all familiar with the statistic with the CEB study where the average enterprise sale has 5.4 decision makers attached to it. If the deal's really big, that number is very low. But of those, almost always one is an executive sponsor. The corporate America today is concerned with risk. They're concerned with reward. How do they drive profits? How do they grow revenues? How do they attract new customers? And the CEO or the C-suite executives are very concerned with both of those things. And so if there's any kind of a large decision, they want to understand what that is, and they're going to be sanctioning that decision.
Right. So, given that in most cases, the salesperson may start off with somebody who's not the executive. Maybe it's the person who's the project lead or the person who has the need or whatever. How should they how should they develop a strategy for engaging with the executive or even getting access to the executive?
I was just working with one of my clients out of Boston on this very topic this week, as a matter of fact, because we have noticed over the course of time that, just as I just mentioned, every single one of their large deals requires an executive sponsor, yet many, many times they can't get past that day-to-day contact or their core contact. And so we actually did a little problem-solving session to dive deep into that issue and to figure out some solutions. And really what we came to, and I think this applies across the board, is that you have to start paving that way early in the sales cycle, much earlier than you would think. I don't know if the first call is too early, but certainly, first, second, third call, you are talking about, the need to make sure that the executive sponsor is informed. You're talking about, that you'd like to have a meeting with that person, at the appropriate time. And the whole key to getting that meeting is to get the support of your day-to-day contact. That is actually percentage-wise, that's your best percentage of getting in front of that C-suite executive. The second best is a referral from outside the organization, and everything after that drops off dramatically. But the very, very best is using that day-to-day contact. Hopefully it's just kind of an internal champion type of contact to sponsor you to that executive at the right time. And then the other thing that we talked about is, you have to do that, there has to be value. And you really have to talk to that champion about not just the value, but the risk to them and the associated timing. And so it's not a once and done conversation. It's a conversation that you are having that leads up to that appropriate time when they will sponsor you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And one of the things that I always try to say to people is to remember that in a B2B selling situation, right? I always use the example like in B2C, right? If I go and buy the latest curved plasma LED, whatever it is, TV on the way home tonight, and I come home, there's no real risk involved in that apart from the fact that my wife might hit me over the head with it because she had money earmarked for something else, right? But that's probably the height of the risk. But in B2B, your decisions can be career enhancing and they can be career limiting if you make the wrong one. So there's a lot of, say angst built up even with your contact, with the champion. And part of what you got to do is I think that's the point, is recognize that there is, so empathize in some way with them so that then you can figure out how to help them get over that.
Yeah, I mean, empathize and also talk through it with them. And there's also some real value to them. So if they understand the value that you could provide the C-suite executive, they also can understand the value to them. So maybe they go with you, and maybe they don't get an audience in the C-suite that often themselves. So so you become sort of the vehicle for them, or maybe they don't go with you, but there's an opportunity then for you to update that executive on the good work that they're doing. So they essentially get recognized where they wouldn't ordinarily. And those are very powerful motivators for your day-to-day contact. And if you just kind of talk through the risk, the timing, the reward, both to the executive and to them, I have found in most cases, if you start early, the reason why you have to start early is because the stakes are low. Once you're on that sales path, the stakes get really high. All of a sudden, people are invested. They're thinking, they're talking to multiple companies. So they're thinking, well, if I sponsor this person, it's going to be showed as favoritism. I'll have to sponsor everybody. The executive doesn't have time to meet with everybody. Maybe they're thinking of an RFP, request for proposal, in which case, there's guidelines. So for tons of other people get involved. There's tons of reasons why the stakes get much higher, in that middle part of the sales process. But if you start early, I have found in most instances, with a very focused effort, you can get it done.
Yeah, I love that. Starting early. I think that's really important. Sorry, we're getting an echo from someone. But anyway, I like the idea of starting early. I think that's really, really important in any sales situation. The more you can. So let's talk a little bit about how do you plan differently for a meeting with an executive as opposed to your contact?
So pre-call planning is to me probably the most important thing as it relates to sales. I had a client out of the Bay Area. One time I was working with their global sales organization, their global account team, and also sales operations. And the director of sales operations said, Lisa, you've done all this stuff with us. If you had to say what is the single most important thing, what would that be? And without hesitation, I said pre-call planning. Right. Because pre-call planning is where you have the opportunity to increase the quality of the customer interaction. And when you increase the quality of the customer interaction, you get a higher quality output. And so when it comes to planning for an executive call, you're going to do all the steps, and you're probably going to do those with your account-based selling team or your manager or a sales coach. It's not something you're going to do on your own, because you need that collaboration and that feedback. But it's thinking through what would make it a great meeting for them. It's thinking through an agenda, that you may or may not share with them, depending on the type of executive. But it's timing that executive. And one of the things I say in my book is that if you secured an hour on the executive's calendar, finish the meeting in 45 minutes, period, no matter what. I have salespeople that say, well, we got in a great conversation. The executive, kept that conversation going. I would say no.
Right.
Finish that meeting in 45 minutes. In my book, I've got executive interviews. John, you're part of the book, at the end of every chapter. And that was a consistent theme. C-suite executives value their time more than anything else. And if you pack value into that meeting, you end that meeting early, and you give them time to have a bathroom break before their next meeting, they're going to remember you. I'm sorry, it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but it's true.
No, I completely agree with that, and I also think that what you're saying is that if you come in with a well-planned meeting, well-executed meeting, the executive's going to remember that. So how some salespeople maybe get a little uptight when they have to engage with an executive or whatever, but I think you would agree that you really need to, you need to come in, you need to be confident in what you're bringing to the table and kind of come in as an equal, obviously being respectful of their position, but you kind of have to have an equal business conversation. So how do you coach salespeople to be able to meet an executive, maybe somebody who's a CEO of a big company, and they think, well, I'm only a little salesperson? How do you coach them to go in and kind of meet them on a more even footing?
Well, the Whale Hunters Group, Barbara Weaver Smith's company, did a study at the end of 2016 and asked a couple questions along these same lines, and sellers ranked anxiety associated with executive engagement as one of their top three, issues, things they were concerned about. And so you're exactly right. You're spot on. It's calling on executives is not easy, and it's not, in the comfort zone of most salespeople. And so the way to become confident is through extensive pre-call planning and strategy work. So if you understand what this call is in relationship to the broader strategy that you have for the opportunity, and you understand exactly not only what you're going to do on that call, but when I do pre-call planning for an executive call, we talk about what can go wrong and what we're going to do. You show up, the executive, now they allocated 45 minutes, they have 15. Right. Somebody comes that you didn't expect. There's all kinds of things that can and do go wrong. And, by talking through those things and figuring out what your strategy is, all those things build confidence. And I guess the last thing is, in some cases, these are existing accounts, and in some cases, they're managed by account managers. And sometimes account managers don't have a sales background. Sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. In the cases that they don't, or maybe it's a young sales rep, and they just can't get to that confidence and speak to that executive on a peer-to-peer level, then they should bring another resource from their company.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. I think that, and it's something that I found even when I ran organizations, that often have to remind salespeople to say, I'm available. The other executives are available. If it's a deal that, and it's worthwhile, and you need to bring one of us along, even if it's only for the title. So that if you're meeting with somebody at a higher level and it's worthwhile bringing the CEO or one of the executive team along just to give you that equalizer, then do it. Anything to help. So I think that's an excellent point.
Can I interject a couple pitfalls there that I've seen in my 30 plus years, in sales and as a sales consultant. So two things. Once you secure that executive call, not only does, the executive from your company want to come, like in many cases, so do 10 other people. Everybody wants to meet with the C-suite.
Right.
So, obviously there's got to be some skill around, who can add value and not bring in, the troops. And then the other pitfall is that, let's say you are bringing an executive from your company, a C-suite executive. The caveat, and this is tricky because you work for them, you work for somebody who works for them probably, or maybe even more layers than that. The caveat is they have to participate in that pre-call planning. They cannot show up without the benefit of that pre-call planning. And yet I see it happen often. And so the person who has to be strong there is the account executive, the global account manager, whoever that person is, has to be that has to happen. Otherwise, those calls can go awry very quickly. And I've seen countless situations where that has happened.
Yeah, no, that's a great catch, actually, because I do recall when I have done it in the past and I have been like the CEO being brought in, the account planning is critical. Sitting down with the account team, sometimes it's the regional VP or the VP of sales and the salesperson, and those people having the confidence to say, listen, John, here's your role in this call, and here's what we'd like you to do. And I think most executives react fine to that, but you have to have the confidence, as you say, to do it, to say, here's your role and here's what we want from you, as opposed to, sort of deferring. And as you say, there's a lot of, let's face it, there's a lot of us who have, plenty to say for ourselves. And if you give us free rein, we'll take over, right? So I think that's a critical, an absolutely critical piece. So, okay, so if you get the meeting with the executive, and it goes well, and you do all the things that you talked about, and you execute well, how do you build on that afterwards? So it's not just maybe a one and done. Great, you got in front of the executive, they were cool, they were good about what you were doing or whatever, and then they disappear. How do you cultivate that? Because that's something good for the long run, right?
Yes, that is the genesis of my entire book. That is why I wrote the book. Because there's tons of information out there on how to secure a meeting with executive. There's trainings, there's blogs, there's books, all kinds of things. Rarely, or at least not that I found in my multi-year research around writing my book, is there information, rock solid information on how do you keep the door open to the C-suite once you get there. And I think the reason why is because it takes so many ergs of energy to get that meeting that it feels like the meeting is the reward. We're done. We got the meeting. We had the meeting. Actually, it was a good meeting. We're done. And we both know, and the account teams, calling on the executives also know, but they just forget that that's just one meeting. It needs to be part of a continuum and a long-term appropriate engagement plan. And so when you're doing that pre-call planning, that is one of the things you think about. One of your objectives for that meeting is to leave the door open. And you talk about how you might do that. What are 2 or 3 things that you might do that, that might cause that to occur? And I talked about, my executive interviews at the end of the chapters in my book. That is a question that I asked almost every C-suite executive. Why would you take a meeting with a salesperson? What would cause that meeting to be valuable? And why would you leave the door open to either them or someone else from their company? And in all cases, the executives say that if there is value in the conversation, they will leave the door open. And so it's really, if you've really planned for that valuable interchange, then it's simply a matter of saying, now, what is the best way to stay in touch, to keep you informed, to, if you don't identify something specific during the meeting, like an introduction to another executive or an invitation to an executive type event. And I recommend that after the meeting, that the account team actually put together a year-long executive engagement, outline that has 4 touch points. 1 or 2 of them live, if possible. The others, the other two don't have to be, but they identify 4 touch points for the year. And then it keeps going after that.
Yeah, and I think you touch on a really important point here, and that's about the difference between account planning and just opportunities, right? Because some people think that account planning is just having multiple opportunities in an account, right? At a company. So I have one opportunity now, then later on I discover another one, or I upsell or whatever, and that's account. But that's not account planning. That's just opportunity. And so the point that you raise here, I think, is a really good one, is that you have to have a strategy for the account, and central to that strategy obviously needs to be, how do you keep the executives engaged?
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you an example just for myself,
Yeah.
Over the last 30 days. So I had one executive was looking for a very, very high level position that would report directly to them. Mm-hmm. And I became aware of that through my internal champion. And as it turns out, I knew a candidate that was perfectly qualified for that level of position. So I went back to my internal champion, which is what I tend to do. I don't tend to engage directly without keeping my internal champion in the loop over, right, every time. So of that quarterly plan, they're going to be the first touch point then to the executive. And I said, I have a candidate that would be a perfect candidate for your position that you're looking for. Is it appropriate for, do you want an introduction? And he checked with the president in this case, and she said, yes, would love an introduction. So, it can be something that you don't even anticipate, but if you know you've got to have those touch points, you're looking for things. Another situation just in the last 30 days, different account, I became aware of this high level executive educational program. Had to be, you had to be invited into this program, intense, development. And another one of my accounts have one of a member, a C-suite executive member of the team that was being groomed to be the CEO. So I, again, talked to my internal champion. I said, I just became aware of this program from somebody who had been in the program. Right. And I'd be happy to make the introduction if this is something that might be of interest for this person. And they said, yeah, that would be great. So, just really understanding what would be valuable and beneficial to them and going to bat for them.
Yeah.
No,
I love those. Again, those are great. Those are great examples and very practical examples. But what it shows you is that the role of a salesperson today, especially in a B2B or a complex sale, is more complicated in many ways than before, and requires more. And I think that's because of all the statistics that were thrown around over the last few years about buyers being all the way through the buying process and all of that. I think some people got the idea that the role of the salesperson was being reduced, if you like, or the skill was being reduced, when it's quite the opposite. The skill set is actually going up. And I think to do what you're just talking about now, you have to be looking for those opportunities. You have to be business savvy and really understand what's going on in their industry, in their business, to find those opportunities to bring additional value. And that's what's differentiating you in the end. Maybe your product or service is pretty commoditized, but you're the differentiator now because you're going that extra mile. But it requires a lot more work from a salesperson to think a little bit more broadly, right?
I couldn't agree more with everything that you said and the role of the salesperson. And I guess it starts with, if you know that you have to touch that executive, and for most organizations, we're talking the average salesperson might only be dealing with 3 or 4 of these in different accounts, maybe 2 in one account, 1 in another, whatever it is. It's not a huge number. Mm-hmm. But if you know you need to touch that person in a meaningful way 4 different times throughout the year, then that causes you to be on the lookout for things. And right. So it's sort of the chicken and the egg. If you have the expectation, you have that plan, then you're very, very open and alert to opportunities that can help you fulfill that plan.
Yeah, again, like I said, I think this is one of the most critical pieces, because I know from my own experiences in the past of having salespeople come into me, it's the ones who follow up later, as you say, with something like, I remember from our conversation that you mentioned such and such. Well, here's something of interest that may be of interest to you. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, it is interesting. And it's interesting that the person remembered or was paying attention, right? Rather than just kind of, hey, just wanted to touch base with you. Yeah, I have nothing to say of value. I just wanted to touch base with you.
Exactly.
So I really love that idea of constantly looking for different ways to create value in the process. So I love these conversations when they're like this, because they fly so fast, because it's all great information. And what advice do you have for a salesperson who maybe isn't getting that access, and maybe the person is just they're not getting that access to the executive? What's the next best thing they can do if it's really blocked?
So I think that there's a couple things that they can do, practical things.
Mm-hmm.
They can engage their account team. So not one person ever has to have the answers. As a matter of fact, when I do my war room work, which is basically becoming part of the account team,
right.
Many times I'll go in and I don't have the answers either, even though this is what I do.
Right.
It's a sticky situation, but what I am confident about is that we can find the answer with the team. And so bring that team together, that account-based team, and say, okay, we know we need to get to an executive. Let's figure out how. Might take us a while, but let's figure out our strategy. So that's one thing that they can do. And then the other thing they can do is, many times companies have really great programs. And I find that, in medium to large size companies, salespeople don't make it their business to understand these programs and take advantage of them. So maybe it's customer entertainment, maybe it's executive to executive connection programs, maybe it's panels at trade shows where they're wanting executive. There's all kinds of different things out there. And the other thing you can do is just find out how can you get some help? What things are out there that can assist you to break the log jam.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really like one of my clients, as an example, sends out an executive card every month. Every month, he puts it on his sales sheet, and the whole thing there is just the cards go to prospects, they go to past customers, they go to current customers, but it goes to an executive, and it's just a high quality stationery. With some sort of a meaningful note. So he creates this touch point. Well, he controls that. Anyone can do that. He controls that touch point. So the short answer is I have never found a situation where there is not something that can be done.
Right.
Never.
So basically, your message would be, don't give up. Go get the team together and brainstorm, even ask your network, ask people that what are ways that you've gotten around this, but don't accept no, even if it's 10 times in a row.
Yes.
I love it. Okay, in our last couple of minutes, we always ask our guests to give us, what is your power tip? So what is the one thing that you do every morning, Lisa, to set yourself up for success for the day?
Yeah, that's a great way to end. So you said, what is the one thing? Well, I read the book, The One Thing, last year. Have you read it?
No, I haven't actually.
I'm not recalling the author right now, so apologies to the author. But it's called The One Thing. And the whole genesis of the book is that what is the one thing that you could do that if you did it, it would make other things easier, or maybe you wouldn't even have to do the other things. So literally the whole book is about just this concept of what is the one thing, and it goes into goals and long-term things, but it also translates to daily. And so that book just really, I love that book. I recommend it to my clients and things all the time. And so that's my tip. Wake up and think to yourself, what is the one thing I could do today that would make everything else easier, or maybe even I wouldn't have to do them because I'm doing this one thing.
Oh, that's fantastic. Love it. Yeah, I'll check that book out. And speaking of books, Lisa, would you like to tell people about your book, where they can get your book, how they can contact you?
Yes, would love to. So my book came out just at the beginning of the year, and it's called The Top Seller Advantage: Powerful Strategies to Build Long-Term Executive Relationships. It's available on Amazon, under $20. It's a 3-hour read, and it is absolutely unequivocally packed full of information and a roadmap to get it done. I'm not the best writer in the world, so, look beyond that. But the content is rock solid. And I have gotten just great feedback, unsolicited feedback from all different kinds of people going, this was extraordinarily helpful. And I've got executive interviews in there, C-suite executive interviews that are literally gold. Salespeople do not have the opportunity to interview executives and ask the questions that I asked. I've spent the last 2 years on this, and you're hearing from the executives directly what they think is important and why they would keep the door open. So it's worth it.
Absolutely, and I would endorse it. I mean, I was one of the interviewees in it, so I can also attest to the quality of the book. I don't contribute to just anything, so I was happy to contribute to this because I think it's an awesome book. How can people contact you directly, Lisa?
Yeah, so my website is www.toplinesales.com. My email is lisa@toplinesales.com. My phone number is 503-753-5209. I hope that's not getting too specific.
Yes, I wouldn't give out your home address just yet.
Right. We'll just stop there.
All right, well, listen, I'd like to thank Lisa again. This was a great conversation. The time flew. Hey, Martha, what's the good Twitter interaction out there?
All fine, yeah.
Yeah, very good. Okay, well, this is another edition of Sales Chat from myself, John Golden of Pipeliner Sales, and Martha of Pipeliner Sales, and of both of us of SalesPOP online magazine. Again, I'd like to thank Lisa Magnuson for joining us today. Check out our book, and we'll see you all for another Sales Chat very soon. Bye now.
Bye.